Hey there folks, so welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from the Barenaked Ladies, titled Silverball. I gotta be honest, I did not know this album was coming out until maybe a week ago. And to be fair, I don't think that unless you follow this band closely or are a really hardcore fan, I don't think anybody knew. No single on the radio, American or Canadian, no major review sites south of the border seem to mention all that much. I got precisely one request for it, but the hype's been pretty much non-existent here. And on some level, that's a damn shame, and just another example of people not giving the Barenaked Ladies enough credit. Breaking out in the mid-90s with an album that's a borderline classic with Gordon, no jokes there, I'm serious, that album's amazing. They did consistently well up in Canada until Stunt and Maroon broke them in the United States. And then without warning, everything just seemed to fall apart. Their 2003 album didn't land them any traction in the rougher, darker, post-grunge rock scene in the early 2000s, and pop rock acts that actually had a sense of humor were pretty much marginalized. So the Barenaked Ladies did the next best thing. They went independent and continued to put out albums of reasonable quality, until the second major blow hit and frontman Stephen Page left the band. It was a shadow that hung over the otherwise excellent record All in Good Time that was released in 2010. As the Barenaked Ladies grappled with that loss, they tried to figure out what they were without Stephen Page, and the fact the album was mostly about that did work in their favor. Fortunately, by 2013, things had recovered a fair bit. And while I didn't love that record, Grinning Streak, longtime fans of this channel might remember that I included Odds Are as my favorite song of 2013 across the board, and I stand by that choice. Odds Are by the Barenaked Ladies is damn near a perfect pop rock song, and the music video made with Rooster Teeth, all kinds of awesome. God, I loved it. But what gave me hope coming out of Grinning Streak was that the band was starting to construct a new identity minus Stephen Page. And while the lyrics weren't quite as biting or obscenely clever, there was a sense of whimsy and underdog charm that was impossible to take away. Sure, there were some cracks in the production and in writing, but those are minor issues. They could refine that going forward, right? And so, of course, I was going to cover Silverball the second I found out about it, and I had high hopes. These guys are Canadian pop rock veterans, practically legends up here, and what meager buzz I could find suggests this album is going to be even better than Grinning Streak. So, did they pull it off? Honestly, look guys, I'm not calling Silverball a bad record, because it's not, but on some level it feels like the exuberant promise of Grinning Streak at its best rings all the more hollow with this album. And look, as much as you could argue that the band is in their third decade of existence, they got a right to stick to their comfort zone. A comfort zone that I might add still manages to create enough rock-solid pop rock that easily outstrips the majority of their peers, but I'm sorry guys, I'm underwhelmed by this, almost across the board. Not a bad record, but not a great one, and for me, definitely a disappointment. So okay, what happened here? Well, the best place to start being the instrumentation and the production, which might be the most reminiscent of the heavier edge that was injected into their most popular material at the turn of the millennium, with just enough of a modern bend to not feel out of place. In other words, a fair bit like Grinning Streak, but a little bit better balanced and produced. But that unfortunately means that since we're looking to modern pop, the percussion is stiffer and pushed more to the front of the mix, the riffs are chunkier, and there's more of a groove-centric focus, which I'd argue isn't a great fit for the band. Now let me stress that we still get some good melodies here. The Barenaked Ladies aren't going to throw away the best parts of their pop appeal, and the addition of some quirkier, almost chiptune synth lines isn't a bad choice for a modern Barenaked Ladies album. It certainly plays better than most of what they tried in Grinning Streak, which didn't quite marry the synths as well. Hell, I dug that cheerful melody balanced against the more acoustic energy A Matter of Time as the guitar simmered in the background with some nice horns. That was a tactic that worked pretty well in the lead-off single, Say What You Want, with the noisier guitars, and then you had the mid-tempo buzzing melodies of the title track and the Alcidia synth elements. I actually like the sound there. It came together pretty well. Then there's Hold My Hand, which takes a watery synth bass background, which is a pretty solid guitar groove to the front of the track, ends with a good solo, brings some welcome snarl to this album. Honestly, I wish there was more of it. Narrow Streets comes close with a solid groove, but it seems like the edges were kind of sanded off that groove, and instead the mix focused on this squealing synth that was placed higher in the mix than it really should have been, and a terrible tonal choice of the solo. Did not like that. It's better on Piece of Cake that oddly sounds like the Barenaked Ladies covered a cross between U2 and ABBA, with a snarled rollick to the guitars and bass, especially on that solo, and weird retro disco synth choice. And bizarrely, I actually kind of really like the song. I would have liked to think on more in this direction. Probably the highlight though for me on this album was the gentle acoustic ballad Toe to Toe, which you hear some good shimmering background effects that sounded great and a really good hand-picked solo. But these are the songs that have the nervous looseness and rock edge that used to characterize the Barenaked Ladies at their best. But songs like the heavier riffs of Get Back Up and that runny synth on Duct Tape Heart, or the burbling overproduced Globetrot with a chintzy popping tone and complete lack of payoff, they just feel awkward to me. The band playing for a sound that used to come naturally to them, and that's a real disappointment. Now, this is not helped by most of the vocals, courtesy of Ed Robertson for the majority of the album, with the occasional track and writing credits from Kevin Hearn or Jim Cregan. Now, the band has always struggled here without Stephen Page's rougher edge to balance out against Ed Robertson's self-deprecating earnestness, but this record shows the absence all the more plainly. I appreciate Robertson giving Hearn a little bit more of a chance in front of the microphone, good for them, but the completely by-the-numbers song Passcode squanders a pretty solid bass frolic and decent piano line with completely underwhelming vocal performance. It's even worse than Tired of Fighting With You, easily the worst song on the album, which does have a solid piano-driven misty vibe, but Hearn doesn't have the emotional range to sell this with more of a comedic tone. At least I sure as hell hope this song was a joke, because Weird Al did this twice already with One More Minute and You Don't Love Me, playing the exact same template with kind of similar lyrics at points. Cregan feels a little bit better on Narrow Streets, with a timbre that might be a little bit solid if he had been mixed a little bit higher, but really the big issue this carries across the entire album is consistent with all the vocalists: a lack of real potent energy. Most of this album plays in very mid-tempo territory, lukewarm enough to be agreeable, but Robertson's voice plays best to earnest power and passion, or overwritten, morally ambiguous material that might have more of a sense of humor. And this is where Silverball really falls short, and the biggest disappointment for me across the board, that's the lyrics. And again, it's not like the lyrics are bad. By the standards of self-deprecating, generally earnest love songs, the Barenaked Ladies can write these in their sleep. The problem is, like with their last album, that missing hidden edge that had a real bite with it courtesy of Stephen Page. And the writing here just doesn't have the layers of little details and fine print that gave the band so much lyrical personality or a sense of humor. Take Matter of Time. Yeah, there's a tired honesty to the song that acknowledging the relationship was probably doomed from the start. I can appreciate that. But the song is so bare bones and thinly sketched with very little metaphors or symbols that I don't get a lot of personality from it. I like the Toronto references on Narrow Streets that try to paint more of a picture, but it never really builds much beyond vague aspirations. But thematically, Silverball is more interested in examining the band's own continued existence, and they seem to toe the line between passive aggressiveness and outright defensiveness, frustrated at a critical audience, like, say, me, who wants them to repeat some of their past successes. You could easily make the argument that songs like Toe to Toe, Piece of Cake, Say What You Want, hell, the majority of this album is directly addressing the audience, the fans, and the critics, with the message being that the band had their moment in the spotlight 15 years ago and trying to find something workable without losing what made them who they are, as they're frustrated and heartily sick of fighting against that, trying to keep with the times. And you know what? To the Barenaked Ladies' credit, the songs where they take a more nuanced look at this breakdown, like on Piece of Cake, and Failure to Stick in the same way, they're some of their best songs. But there's a fine line to getting this right, and the tone and the writing isn't often balanced well enough to make it really hit for me. The instrumentation is very chipper and light, like most of their stuff is, but the writing is tinged with frustration and melancholy, and honestly, the writing's not quite sharp enough to make that work. What's telling from Silverball is that the band isn't quite sure themselves what the original formula was, and it's true, they never did sell out, instead saying what they know and what works. But at the same time, peeling through defensive writer's block and trying to recreate that spark doesn't exactly lend itself to great material all the time, especially when it has nowhere near the energy or momentum or nuance in the writing delivery to really sell us on it. In other words, Silverball to me feels like a record celebrating its own existence. But the question of whether or not that celebration was worth having with this album, that's harder to answer. On some level, I get it. Keeping your ideas fresh about a dozen albums into your multi-decade career, that's incredibly difficult, especially when your sound hasn't strayed that far from what you know and you're missing one of your best songwriters. But this album, it feels tired to me, and the Barenaked Ladies in their current incarnation don't have the emotional nuance in their delivery or writing to elevate that sound, coupled with production and instrumentation that doesn't really take any chances or have any real punch or energy to it. I'm thinking a light 6 out of 10, and only a recommendation if you're a hardcore fan like me. Guys, I really wanted to love this album, but for the most part, Silverball feels a little bit more like a gutter ball. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I can imagine some of you guys are kind of annoyed or kind of angry, but guys, I wanted to like this. It just didn't connect. Nothing as good as Odds Are or Boomerang or Did I Say It Out Loud or Gonna Walk, and that was a real disappointment. But beyond that, if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.